Kill. A little bit about Alice that I'm aware of is she's currently a volunteer with the Friends of Beaver Creek State Park and is involved in many aspects of the park in preserving its history, making presentations, raising funds, and many more things I'm sure that I'm not going to cover. She's also past employee of the Western Reserve Historical Society and was working at Loghurst Historical Property in Canfield. She's a history enthusiast taking special interest in Civil War history, and she also plays the dulcimer. And I'm sure that's just a small amount of a little history of Alice. But tonight she will be speaking on the day the Civil War came to our backyard, tracing the trail of Confederate Brigadier General John Morgan and his raid up the Ohio River into the Union Territory and ultimate the surrender at West Point. And obviously the effect that it had on local communities and its citizens. So at this point I'll go ahead and turn it over to Alice so she can tell us a little bit more.
You're applauding and I haven't done anything yet.
You showed up. That's a big point.
I did. It was a little bit difficult getting here. One place we were tied up in traffic and thought maybe we wouldn't get here on time, and maybe my son exceeded the speed limit. I don't know, but I don't usually ride in the passenger seat, but I have a little bit of problem with night vision, so I said, oh, I'll have him drive. Well, maybe I'll try it myself. Oh, well. I brought all kinds of goodies. And some photos, and I was going to bring more photos, but I ran out of ink this afternoon. Always. I don't know whether I have enough of these, but we can pass some of these around. This is the map that Morgan took from Kentucky into Indiana, into Ohio, to this surrender point at West Point. So we can start here and can share those with the folks. I've been volunteering at Pioneer Village of Beaver Creek State Park for quite a few years, and about 3 years ago I developed history programs for our activities that we have on the first Saturday of every month, May through September. And many years before that I discovered that Friends of Beaver Creek State Park have a very important piece of local history. We have what's left of the surrender tree that General John Hunt Morgan surrendered under. And we have that in the upper level of Gaston's Mill. We're closed for the season now, but we open on the first weekend in May, and we're open through October, the month of October, with various programs and activities. But the first Saturday of every month, May through September, we have what we call Bring the Village Alive. Gaston's Mill is actually operating and grinding grain. We have the blacksmith shop operating and all kinds of activities. And I do a history program every first Saturday. And this is the program that I do for the month of July, because General Morgan surrendered in July. And what I was able to print out. Not much. This is a stone near West Point. It's not exactly where the surrender was, because it's been moved since then. This stone marks the spot where Confederate Raider General John H. Morgan surrendered his command to Major George Rue, July 26, 1863. It's the farthest point north ever reached by any body of Confederate troops during the Civil War. And the property where the surrender happened, including the surrender tree and this monument, was all provided by Will Thompson of East Liverpool. And Will Thompson is known for his music and the many hymns that he wrote. And that's another program I do. Morgan's Raid. On June of 1863, Confederate Brigadier General John Hunt Morgan departed his camp in Tennessee on a raid with 2,460 troops, intending to divert the attention of the Union Army of Ohio from the Southern forces in the state. On July 8, 1863, Morgan crossed the Ohio River at Brandenburg, Kentucky, and entered into Indiana. In violation of his orders to remain in Kentucky. After a victory at the Battle of Corydon, Morgan proceeded eastward into Ohio, pursued by Federal troops under Brigadier General James M. Shackelford. On July 19th, Morgan attempted to cross the Ohio River into West Virginia and Buffington Island, Ohio, upriver from Pomeroy in Meigs County. Some of his men did make it across the river and back into the South. However, the Union forces under Brigadier General Edward H. Dobson and Henry Judith captured an estimated 800 of the 1,200 of Morgan's forces. General Morgan remained, and his remaining 400 men of his, let's try that again. General Morgan and the remaining 400 men of his command escaped, cut off from the river crossing. When another attempt to ford the river failed, he headed north, eventually reaching Columbiana County, and still hoping to cross the Ohio River at some point and head back to the south. His route took him through a number of terrified villages, including Moorfield, Harrisville, New Athens, Smithfield, New Alexander, Wintersville, Two Ridges, Richmond, East Springfield, Burkholtz, and Monroeville in Jefferson County. With horses playing out and his men exhausted, Morgan trudged northward while his pursuers blocked the attempt to reach the river. Did you recognize the names of some of those little towns? Skirmish at Two Ridges Church near Wintersville. While en route to Wintersville on July 25, 1863, Brigadier General John Hunt Morgan and his Confederate raiders stopped at the farm of Mrs. John Hanna for a short nap and a meal. Working their way towards Wintersville through the area south of Two Ridges Church, the Confederates ran into scouts of the Jefferson County militia. Several volleys were exchanged, resulting in a militiaman dead and a local woman wounded. The Confederates quickly passed through Wintersville on their way to Richmond. Morgan's men advised inhabitants to take cover from the impending fight. At the Two Ridges Church, regular Union forces under Major William B. Way caught up with Morgan's rear units. Several of Way's troops were wounded as the militia, commanded by Colonel James Collier, came up the hill from in front of the church. Their view was obstructed by the dust raised by Morgan's raiders. At this time, the Union forces under General Shackelford were advancing towards the area of the church. The militia filled their artillery pieces with scrap metal and fired it. Some confusion resulted, giving Morgan and his raiders an opportunity to escape to the north. When I was working on this program and researching, I didn't realize it was really a big thing. And I found out there was artillery, which is the cannon fire, And then as he goes down the road, there was the Battle of Salineville. On July 25th, 1863, General Morgan and his raiders headed north following the skirmish at Two Ridges Church just outside of Wintersville. And that church is there today, restored. It's beautiful. Union pursuers under the command of Brigadier General James M. Shackelford were hard on the heels of Morgan and his men, entered into the small town of Richmond, Ohio. Morgan collected a few fresh mounts before he headed to East Springfield. Arriving there around 7 p.m., the Confederates found a handful of fresh horses and interrupted a church choir's practice. Local villager Bill Huscroft offered Morgan $360 not to take his best horses. Morgan asked to see the money and then relieved Huscroft of both the money and the horses. Morgan left the village riding in a black buggy pulled by two white horses. He was nasty. Overnight at Old Nebo. About 8 p.m. on the evening of July 25th, 1863, General Morgan and fewer than 500 Confederate raiders arrived at Nebo, now known as Burkholtz, and set up camp throughout the village. Selecting the Herdman Taylor farm as his headquarters, Morgan forced the family to prepare a meal for him and his officers. The Confederate advance scouts settled down at the D.G. Allen farm just north of Nebo. The rear guard camped at the Thomas McConaughey farm south of town. The following morning, word arrived that some of Morgan's advance scouts to the south had been attacked by Union scouts under General Shackelford. News traveled quickly among the raiders and they prepared to move out right away. As the rear guard left, they set fire to the Yellow Creek Bridge, thinking that it would slow down the pursuers. However, the Summer Creek level was very low and easy to ford. At this point, the Confederates hoped to reach Babb's Island, near East Liverpool, to ford the river into what was just recently made West Virginia. West Grove Cemetery. Boy, did I have trouble finding this place. When I was going through all this, with the help of all the work that had been done by the Ohio Historic Society, we traveled from from Wintersville to West Point and followed the trail. Because my husband didn't want to go to the Kentucky where they crossed the river, so we didn't want to go that far, so we picked it up at Wintersville. Union cavalry carried wounded Confederates to the porch of a nearby farm of John Moore, where two died of their wounds. They were buried in the rear portion of West Grove Cemetery. Their graves remained unmarked until 1910, when a local historian learned of their grave sites. One soldier's grave was identified as that of Private John Miller. Local citizens remembered the other fatality as unknown, a mere boy. The third wounded Confederate, Frank Bixby, Company B, 8th Kentucky Cavalry, survived only to die in captivity at Camp Chase in Columbus, Ohio in July of 1864. Morgan started his raid with several thousand raiders. By the time they reached Jefferson County, his command had dwindled to several hundred. They were exhausted from riding hundreds of miles with few opportunities for sound sleep or rest. Monroeville in a trap. July 26, 1863, General John H. Morgan was in a race that was rapidly coming to an end. Union pursuers seemed to be everywhere as Confederates worked their way north from Nebo, present-day Burkholtz. After passing through Monroeville, which is outside of Salineville, Morgan learned that a large Union force occupied Saleenville, just a mile ahead. With Union cavalry closing in the rear, Morgan's raiders were trapped. At the Burson Farm, north of Monroeville, Morgan instructed his rear guard, commanded by Colonel Leroy Kluke, to hold the enemy while the remaining force escaped across country. Around 8 o'clock a.m., Kluke's cavalry men were attacked by the 9th Michigan Cavalry under Major William B. Way, who pushed the Confederates southwest, wounding several raiders and capturing 55 along the Monroeville-Saleenville Road before they could escape. Meanwhile, the Union artillery in the Monroeville Cemetery found the range of Morgan's forces. Morgan, mounted on his trusty thoroughbred sorrel, Glencoe, skillfully led his men west through a deep ravine. The Union cannon barrels could not be depressed enough to fire effectively on the Confederates, and the shots sailed harmlessly over their heads. Although the men suffered many casualties at Burson's farm, Morgan once again escaped. Well, by now he's riding his trusty thoroughbred sorrel, Glencoe. What happened to the white horses he stole from the man down the road? I don't know. Saleenville, the final engagement. On the morning of July 26, 1863, Brigadier General John Hunt Morgan and several hundred Confederate raiders were attacked several miles west of the small town of Saleenville, Ohio, by Union cavalry advancing from Monroeville under command of William B. Way. After the raiders were spotted at Riley Church near the Sharp Farm, a running fight ensued. Captain Ralph Sheldon's troop of Company C, 2nd Kentucky Cavalry, wheeled about and directed fire into the Union in pursuit, effectively breaking it up. Lieutenant Smith Frisk, riding at the head of the Union forces, was shot from his horse. Several Confederates were wounded or captured. This would be the last engagement in Morgan's raid. From there, the Confederates split, some riding north and some remaining under Morgan, headed west towards Carrollton. Morgan's group circled back towards the east and rejoined other members of his command west of Saleenville. As had been the practice, Morgan enlisted local guides, including citizens on their way to service at the Saleenville Catholic Church. With this largely voluntary assistance, Morgan's troops resumed an easterly march near Bethesda Church, hoping to reach the Ohio River and cross safely. Time and circumstances were clearly working against Morgan. Following the engagement at the Sharp Farm, an African-American youth was found hiding on the property. Identified as Boxer, or Sam, the boy claimed to have accompanied Morgan as a menial worker. The Sharp family employed the youth on their farm for several years. It was reported that he was killed in Detroit, Michigan after leaving Ohio several years earlier. Saleenville to West Point and the surrender. The Union General Shackelford continued in pursuit of Morgan, leading a mixed command of cavalry, artillery, mounted infantry from Illinois, Kentucky, Tennessee, Michigan, Ohio, as well as the Steubenville militia. Morgan's weary men were so isolated under constant pursuit and headed deeper into enemy territory. Eventually, Morgan was flanked and cut off by the Union forces on July 26, 1863, at Saleenville, near New Lisbon, now known as Lisbon. Badly outnumbered, Morgan attempted to cut his way out of an estimated 3,000 Federals. He lost 364 men, including 23 dead and several wounded, and nearly 300 captured. in a firefight that lasted more than an hour and a half. Remarkably, General Morgan and a small number of his men managed to elude capture. However, at 2:00 p.m., they surrendered to Union member Major George W. Rue of the 9th Kentucky Cavalry and near West Point in Ohio, approximately 8 miles northeast of Sleenville. Major Rue later reported that General Morgan, upon first seeing the major and his troops approaching, surrendered to one of his own prisoners, an Ohio militia captain named Burbridge, who immediately paroled Morgan and his fellow officers, an act that would have allowed them to return home to Kentucky as non-combatants. Major Rue disregarded the surrender and insisted that Morgan formally surrender to Union forces, ignoring the paroles. Troops escorted Morgan to Columbus, Ohio, where many of his officers were imprisoned in Ohio Penitentiary. But I also read that before he was sent to Columbus, he spent a night in jail in Wellsville. In July and August of 1863, Ohio Governor David Todd led the inquiry into Morgan's surrender. Governor Todd concluded that Captain Burbridge was actually James Burbick, a private citizen of New Lisbon, Ohio, who had never served as an officer in the Ohio militia. Governor Todd ruled that he had no authority over Morgan or Morgan's surrender to the Union, and the Morgan surrender to the Union stood. Okay. This is pretty much a copy of the scrapbook that we have at the surrender tree in the upper level of Gaston's Mill. And it has photos. Maybe you can pass this around so everybody can take a look at all the photos and everything of who these people were, what they looked like. And then there's the surrender tree. There's pictures in there of the surrender tree and the display we have at Gaston's Mill of all the things that we have collected and gathered there. The surrender tree gets recognition at Beaver Creek State Park. An 8-foot-high, 1,000-pound tree trunk is what remains of the tree that witnessed the day the Civil War came to our backyard. The surrender tree has had several homes in the past century and a half, including 80 years in the Carnegie Library in East Liverpool, Ohio. East Liverpool's most famous native son, composer, musician, and businessman Will L. Thompson, was instrumental in acquiring the remainder of the surrender tree for the library in the early 1900s, after it had been struck by lightning in the field where it was located. He also purchased the property in which the surrender took place and paid for a monument stone that remains today. When the library was to undergo major renovations, it decided the tree must go. Well, of course, the library had to make room for a computer lab, and the tree had to go. No one seemed to want it. It was too large to display in most places in East Liverpool. The witness to the most northern Civil War action was sent to East Liverpool's Street Department garage, where it lay for many years on the floor, covered with a tarp. With the help of East Liverpool attorney Timothy R. Brooks, the tree was rescued and brought to Beaver Creek State Park, where it stands in a place of honor in the upper level of Gaston's Mill. Friends of Beaver Creek State Park now offer a newly revised exhibit that includes replicas of the flags that were present at the surrender, plus photos and the history of Morgan's raid for visitors to enjoy. Did you know these are some of the things that I found that were interesting little tidbits about General Morgan. General Morgan was ordered not to cross the Ohio River by his commanding officer, General Braxton Bragg. He disobeyed orders and did so on July 8, 1863. On July 8, 1863, Morgan and 2,460 men with horses commandeered 2 steamships at Brandenburg, Kentucky, and used them to cross into Indiana. This process took almost 2 hours. Morgan's raid, or the Great Raid, it is known as the longest raid of the Civil War, and West Point, Ohio, were the most northern points reached by Confederate troops. General Morgan's nickname was Thunderbolt of the Confederacy. More than 2,500 horses were commandeered and collected by Morgan and his men during the raid through Indiana and Ohio. After Morgan surrendered, he spent the night in Wellsville, Ohio, before being transported along with some of his officers to the Ohio Penitentiary. He stayed there until November 26, 1863, when he and several of his men escaped. General Morgan returned to Tennessee, where on September 4, 1864, he was surprised by a Union private while attempting to escape during the Union raid on Greenville, Tennessee. The private called for Morgan to halt. Morgan ignored, and the private shot and killed him. Morgan was buried 3 times and had 3 funerals. After his death on September 4th, Morgan's body was transported to Abingdon, Virginia, where he was buried in Sinking Spring Cemetery. 4 days later, his body was sent to Richmond, Virginia, where it laid in state in the Confederate capital. His body was then laid to rest in Hollywood Cemetery in Richmond. At the request of his family, the body of General Morgan was moved a 3rd time, April 17, 1868, this time buried in the family plot in Lexington, Kentucky Cemetery. His brother Thomas Morgan, also killed in action during the Civil War, was moved from its original burial site to Lexington Cemetery, where there was a double funeral ceremony for both of them. Also, we have some flags. We have some flags on display, a few of them. But I was curious about the Confederate flags. The United States of America has had only one type of flag. The stars have changed with the addition of states, but the flag is the flag is basically the same. I'm going to wreck this place. One of the first flags, although never actually adopted by the Confederacy, was the Bonnie Blue flag. It was the first flag to represent the collective group of seceding states. The Bonnie Blue flag consisted of a single blue field with a white 5-point star in the center. It was first displayed at the Convention of the People of Mississippi on January 9, 1861, and was celebrated in the popular song, The Bonnie Blue Flag, often sung by Southern soldiers heading off to war. The first national flag of the Confederacy. We do have a replica of this flag at the surrender tree at Beaver Creek. This is the flag that was known as the Stars and Bars. Not what you think of the Stars and Bars, which was the Confederate battle flag, not an official flag. It was raised on March 4th, 1861, the day Abraham Lincoln was sworn into office as President of the United States. It flew over official buildings in the South and by military units for the next 2 years. The Confederate states represented by the Stars and Bars, stars and wide bars, at that time were South Carolina, who seceded December 20th, 1860, Mississippi, seceding January 9th, 1861, Florida, January 10th, 1861, Alabama, January 11th, 1861, Georgia. January 19th, 1861, Louisiana. January 26th, 1861, and Texas, February 1st, 1861. First national flag of the Confederacy. Second national flag of the Confederacy. They couldn't make up their mind what they wanted. Yeah. Second national flag of the Confederacy was also known as the stainless banner. Was first used May 12, 1863 to cover the coffin of beloved General Thomas J. Stonewall Jackson. 1 month previous, Senate Bill number 132 described the flag with these words: "The Congress of the Confederate States of America do enact that the flag of the Confederate States shall be as followed. A white field with the battle flag now being used shall be in a square and accompanied by 1/3 of the width of the 1/3 of the width of the flag." Yeah, about that. So it's basically a white flag. The bill approved, both the House and the Senate, became official May 1st, 1863. Because the connection to Stonewall Jackson, the fact that he and the flag appeared on the $100 bill, that was often referred to as Jackson's flag. At this point, the flag had 13 stars. They represented the original 7 Confederate states, 4 more joining states, as well as Kentucky and Missouri. In the effort to secede, efforts to secede were unsuccessful. The 4 joining states were Virginia, April 17th, 1861, Arkansas, May 6th, 1861, Tennessee, May 7th, 1861, North Carolina, May 21st, 1861. Second national flag. Okay. Then there was a third national flag of the Confederacy. The bill was passed by the Senate February 6, 1865, by the House of Representatives on February 27th to adopt yet another national flag. It became law on March 4th and added to the stainless banner design, which was a wide red band running vertically down the fly side of the white field. This solved the problem of the flag appearing to be a flag of truce when hung limp on the staff. Because the war was so short-lived, following the adoption of the third national flag, Lee surrendered at Appomattox on April 10, 1865. Few were ever actually flung. The United States at that time had a 34-star flag. In 1861, 1 star was added to the 33-star flag of the United States representing Kansas, bringing the total number to 34. As the southern states began to secede, President Abraham Lincoln ordered that the stars representing those stars remain on the United States flag. So, for the 4 years of the American Civil War, the Confederate States were represented on both the Confederate flags and the flag of the United States. Lincoln was confident that the nation would be whole again. And the battle flag that everybody knows, that we see around here. When I first started with the project of expanding the display at Beaver Creek, Pioneer Village, of the surrender tree, they had representing, well, they had a modern 50-star American flag there. And they had purchased probably 3 of the Confederate battle flags over so many years, displayed at the surrender tree. And somehow they all came up missing. So I suggested that I go to Gettysburg quite often, because my husband and I have a camper that lives in a campground there. so I'm at Gettysburg a lot, that I would buy a 34-star flag and the first national Confederate flag, which the Confederates were carrying at the time of the surrender, and placed those flags there. They've been there almost 5 years. No problems. No one has stolen the first national Confederate flag because most people don't know what it is. So I feel that we're safe there. We have a nice display of the surrender tree, and I had a lot of help putting together this program. And the scrapbook that's going around is the scrapbook that I have there on a music stand, a wooden music stand at the surrender tree. So anyone comes to visit can look through the scrapbook, see the pictures, and learn about this. But Friends of Beaver Creek State Park wish to thank and acknowledge the following for making this display possible: the Ohio Historical Society, Timothy Brooks, East Liverpool Historical Society, Ohio Civil War Trail Commission, Mahoning Valley Civil War Roundtable, Carnegie Public Library, Mike Bucksco, staff writer for Post-Gazette, OhioHistoryCentral.org, Wikipedia.org, and the photos and scrapbooks by Alice A. Whitehill, Friends of Beaver Creek State Park. So that concludes my program, and when we open in May, please come to Beaver Creek State Park and see what we have to offer. It's Pioneer Village. It's right off of Route 7, near the new Beaver Local High School. And first Saturday of every month, there's always something interesting going on, but we're open every weekend. And the buildings are all open for self-tour. We have a blacksmith shop. We have the chapel. We have a one-room school. These are all log structures. We have a log cabin that would be home life. About the time, a rural area, about the time Ohio became a state. We are in the process of acquiring a 2-story log house that was donated to us. It's located just outside of Columbiana right now on Route 14, and I think we're going into the 3rd year of getting everything processed. It is coming into a state park, so there's a tremendous amount of red tape, but they think that this year they will start removing the house. The logs have to be taken down log by log and examined to see if they can be reused. Most of them can be, and then moved to the site in our Pioneer Village and reconstructed. So that'll be a project, hopefully, for this summer, that we can see some construction of our new log house. And we lost the homestead house that was there. I think it's been 5 years now. We lost the Williams house to fire. And we're not really replacing the Williams house, as people were wanting to reconstruct the Williams house like it was. You know, you really can't construct it to be the Williams house again, but we were very, very lucky to have this log house donated to us. It's taken a lot of work to raise the money to have this done, but hopefully 2 years from now, you'll be able to come and visit the new log house and everything else in Pioneer Village. So thank you very much for having me come here.
All right. Well, thank you very much. Sorry.
Kevin, we're also doing another promotion thing November 28th at Bob Evans. On that day, 15% of all their sales will go to the Historical Society's trolley campaign. If you tell them, show them proof of a flyer that I would like to pass out to some of the people here tonight, and if they would pass the word that we're doing a fundraiser for the 28th on the trolley.
All right, so make sure you pick up a flyer to the Bob Evans item.
And if you don't have the flyer, you can go on our Facebook page or our web page and pick it up and load it on your phone.